I still remember the exact moment my father's face turned cold. It was my wedding day, June 15th, in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, white roses adorned every surface, and 200 guests in designer clothes sipped champagne and waited for the ceremony to begin. Everything was perfect, exactly as my mother had planned it. Except for one detail. The groom. My name is Alexander Harrison, but everyone calls me Alex. I'm 26 years old, and up until 6 months ago, I was the beloved only daughter of Richard Harrison, CEO of Harrison Industries, one of the largest real estate development companies on the East Coast. My father built an empire from nothing, starting with a small construction company in Queens and turning it into a billion-dollar corporation with properties from Boston to Miami. Growing up, I had everything money could buy. Private schools, summer homes in the Hamptons, ski trips to Aspen, a trust fund that would have set me up for life. But I also had expectations. My father expected me to marry well, to someone who could expand the Harrison empire, someone from our world of country clubs and charity galas and business connections. That someone was supposed to be Preston Ashford III, son of the Ashford banking family, my boyfriend of 3 years. We'd met at a fundraiser for the Met, been set up by our mothers who'd been friends since their own debutante days. Preston was handsome, educated, from the right family. He checked every box on my father's list. Except I didn't love him. And 6 months before my planned wedding to Preston, I met Marcus. Marcus Chin worked as a high school teacher at a public school in the Bronx. I met him at a literacy nonprofit event where I was volunteering, one of the few things I did that my father actually approved of, though he saw it more as networking than genuine charity work. Marcus was there with a group of his students, kids from tough neighborhoods who were part of an after-school reading program. He had this way about him, this genuine warmth and passion when he talked about his students, about education, about making a difference. He wore a slightly wrinkled button-down shirt and khakis, had paint stains on his shoes from an art project, and when he smiled, his whole face lit up. He was nothing like the men I usually met at charity events, the ones in $1,000 suits who talked about stock portfolios and vacation homes. We started talking about the literacy program, and before I knew it, 2 hours had passed. He asked for my number, and I gave it to him, even though a voice in my head warned me that my father would never approve. Our first date was at a small Thai restaurant in the East Village, nothing fancy, just good food and better conversation. Marcus told me about growing up in Flushing, Queens, the son of Chinese immigrants who ran a small grocery store. About how he'd been the first in his family to go to college, working 3 jobs to get through NYU. About his dream of opening a charter school in an underserved community, giving kids the opportunities he'd fought so hard to get. I told him about my life too, but it felt shallow in comparison. What did I have to be proud of? Being born into wealth? Getting a degree from Columbia that my father's donation had probably helped secure? Working at my father's company in a position I'd been handed, not earned? You volunteer at that literacy program, Marcus pointed out when I voiced these thoughts. That matters. And you clearly care about making a difference, or you wouldn't be there. I don't know, I admitted. Sometimes I feel like I'm just playing at being helpful, you know? Like it's a hobby more than a commitment. So make it a commitment, he said simply. You have resources, connections, privilege. You could use all of that for real good if you wanted to. It was the first time anyone had challenged me like that, had suggested I could be more than just Richard Harrison's daughter. I fell in love with him that night, sitting in that small restaurant with mismatched chairs and a menu written on a chalkboard. Breaking up with Preston was messy. He was furious, his family was outraged, and my father was devastated. Not because his daughter's heart was broken, but because a valuable business alliance had just fallen through. This teacher, my father said, spitting out the word like it was poison. This nobody from Queens. You threw away Preston Ashford for him? I threw away a loveless relationship for someone who actually sees me as a person, not a business asset, I corrected. Don't be naive, Alexandra. Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't build empires. This Marcus, what can he offer you? A teacher's salary? A life of struggling to make ends meet? He offers me respect, partnership, genuine affection. Things I never got from Preston. My father's face hardened. If you marry this man, you're making a choice. And choices have consequences. I thought he was bluffing. I thought that when it came down to it, he'd choose his daughter over his pride. I was wrong. Marcus proposed to me on a bench in Central Park, near Bethesda Fountain, on a cold February evening. He didn't have an expensive ring, just a simple gold band with a small diamond that had belonged to his grandmother. It was more meaningful than any 5-carat rock from Tiffany's could have been. I know I'm not what your family expected, he said, kneeling in the snow. I know I can't give you the life you're used to. But I love you, Alex. I see you, the real you, not the version your father wants you to be. And I promise to spend every day of my life being a true partner to you. I said yes through happy tears, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was making a choice that was truly mine. Planning the wedding was a nightmare. My mother tried to be supportive, but she was caught between her husband and her daughter. She wanted us to have the big plaza wedding, insisted on paying for it herself from her personal accounts. Marcus's parents were uncomfortable with the extravagance but gracious about it. We just want you to be happy, his mother, Linda, told me over tea at their small apartment in Flushing. Marcus has always had a good heart. He knows what matters in life. We trust his judgment, and we welcome you to our family. Their warmth stood in stark contrast to my father's cold disapproval. He refused to walk me down the aisle, refused to even RSVP to the wedding. My mother begged him to reconsider, but he was immovable. She's made her choice, he told my mother within my earshot. Now she can live with it. The morning of my wedding, I woke up in my childhood bedroom in our townhouse on the Upper East Side, sunlight streaming through the silk curtains my mother had chosen when I was 16. The room was exactly as I'd left it when I moved out briefly for college, pale blue walls, white furniture, photographs from my privileged childhood lining the dresser. Pictures of me at horse riding lessons in Connecticut, at our summer house in Southampton, at various charity galas with my father, both of us dressed to the nines. I stared at those photos, at the girl I used to be, and wondered if she'd recognize the woman I was becoming. My mother came in with coffee and croissants from Maison Kaiser, the French bakery on Madison Avenue we'd been going to since I was a little girl. She set the tray down on my bed and sat beside me, smoothing my hair like she used to when I was small. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Like I'm making the biggest decision of my life," I admitted. "And like I'm losing my father in the process." "He's not coming," she said softly. It wasn't a question. "No, Mom. He's not coming." She pulled me into her arms, and I breathed in her familiar scent, Chanel No. 5 and the lavender sachets she kept in her closet. "I'm so sorry, baby. I tried everything. I begged him, I reasoned with him, I even threatened to leave him if he didn't come. But he's stubborn, and his pride is hurt, and he can't see past it." "Did he say anything? Any message for me?" My mother's face crumpled slightly. He said he loves you. That he'll always love you. But that he can't watch you make what he considers a mistake. He thinks if he doesn't enable it, you'll realize you're wrong and come back. That's not going to happen, Mom. I know. I told him that. But your father has convinced himself that this is just a phase, that Marcus is some kind of rebellion against him. He doesn't understand that you genuinely love this man. Because he's never asked, I said, feeling the familiar anger rising. He's never sat down with me and asked why I love Marcus, what I see in him, what makes me happy. He just made his judgment and expected me to fall in line. That's how your father operates. He's used to people doing what he says. In business, it works. In family, She trailed off, shaking her head. We sat in silence for a moment, holding each other. Finally, my mother pulled back and cupped my face in her hands. "You look beautiful," she said. "And you're going to be a beautiful bride. Don't let your father's absence ruin this day. You're marrying a man who loves you, who sees you, who wants to build a life with you. That's what matters." "I know. I just wish Dad could see it too. Maybe someday he will. But today is about you and Marcus. Focus on that." My bridesmaids arrived an hour later, my college roommate Sarah, my cousin Jennifer, and 2 friends from the literacy program where I'd met Marcus. They brought champagne and laughter and helped me get ready, doing my hair and makeup, helping me into my dress. The dress was simpler than the elaborate gown my mother had initially wanted me to wear. It was elegant and classic, with a fitted bodice and a flowing skirt, but it wasn't the fairy tale princess dress she'd envisioned for my wedding to Preston. This dress was me, understated, sophisticated, real. "You look stunning," Sarah said, adjusting my veil. "Marcus is going to lose his mind when he sees you." "I hope so," I said, smiling despite my nerves. My Uncle Richard, my father's younger brother who'd always been more easygoing than his older sibling, knocked on the door. "The car's here," he said. "You ready, kiddo?" Uncle Richard had agreed to walk me down the aisle when my father refused. It wasn't what I'd dreamed of, but he'd stepped up without hesitation, and I was grateful. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom was breathtaking. My mother had outdone herself with the decorations, thousands of white roses, crystal chandeliers sparkling overhead, candlelight everywhere. It was beautiful and elegant and everything a society wedding should be, except for the gaping hole where my father should have been. When I walked down the aisle on Uncle Richard's arm, I made myself not look at the empty seat in the front row. Instead, I focused on Marcus, standing at the altar in a simple but well-tailored suit, his eyes locked on mine with such love and certainty that everything else faded away. He mouthed "You're beautiful" as I approached, and I felt tears prick my eyes. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotion. We'd written our own vows, and when Marcus spoke his voice shook slightly. "Alexandra, I promise to love you not despite who you are, but because of who you are. I promise to support your dreams, even when they scare me. I promise to stand beside you as an equal partner, not above you or below you, but with you. I promise to see you, really see you, every single day for the rest of our lives. And I promise that no matter what challenges we face, we'll face them together." When it was my turn, I had to pause to collect myself before speaking. "Marcus, you came into my life when I was living someone else's version of what my life should be. You showed me who I could be when I had the courage to choose for myself. You've never asked me to be anything other than who I am. You've never judged me for my privilege or my mistakes. You've just loved me, completely and unconditionally. I promise to love you the same way, to see you, to support you, to stand with you. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word. And I promise that I will never, ever take you or this love for granted." There wasn't a dry eye in the room as we exchanged rings and the officiant pronounced us husband and wife. When Marcus kissed me, I heard cheers and applause, and for that moment, I forgot about everything except this man I'd chosen and the life we were about to build together. The reception was lovely. Marcus's family had come out in force, his parents, his grandmother, his 2 younger sisters, cousins, and aunts and uncles I'd been getting to know over the past year. They were warm and welcoming, treating me like I'd always been part of their family. My mother's side of the family was there too, most of them defying my father's implicit instruction to boycott. They came up to congratulate us, many of them pulling me aside to whisper that they thought I was making the right choice, that they admired my courage to follow my heart. "Your father is being an ass," my Aunt Caroline said bluntly. "He'll regret this someday, mark my words. But you go live your life, sweetheart. Be happy." During the father-daughter dance, traditionally the highlight of any wedding, I danced with Uncle Richard instead. The DJ played Unforgettable by Nat King Cole, the song my father and I were supposed to dance to. I tried not to cry as Uncle Richard twirled me around the dance floor. "He should be here," Uncle Richard said quietly. "My brother is making the biggest mistake of his life, and he's too damn stubborn to see it." "It's his choice," I said, though my voice cracked. "It's the wrong choice. But for what it's worth, Alex, I'm proud of you. You're stronger than I think even you realize." After that dance, Marcus swept me back onto the floor for our first dance as husband and wife. As he held me close and we swayed to At Last by Etta James, he whispered in my ear, "Are you okay?" "I'm married to you," I whispered back. "I'm better than okay. Your dad's an idiot for missing this." "Yeah, he is. But that's his loss, not ours." The party went late into the night. We danced, we laughed, we celebrated with people who genuinely cared about us. Marcus's teaching colleagues were there, telling embarrassing stories about him mixing up students' names in his first year. My friends from the literacy program shared how Marcus and I had met, making it sound like a romantic comedy meet cute rather than the awkward conversation over donated books that it actually was. Around midnight, my mother found me on the terrace, taking a breath of fresh air. "I have something for you," she said, handing me an envelope. "Don't open it now, just keep it safe." "What is it?" "Insurance," she said cryptically. "Your father doesn't know I'm giving this to you. But you're my daughter, and I'm not going to leave you high and dry just because he's being pig-headed. Promise me you'll keep it somewhere safe and only use it if you really need it." I hugged her tight. "Thank you, Mom. For everything. For being here, for supporting me, for loving me even when it puts you in a difficult position." "You're my baby girl," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'll always be here for you, no matter what your father says or does." It wasn't until later, back in our hotel room at the plaza where we were spending our wedding night, that I opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000 and a note in my mother's handwriting. "Alexandra, this is for my inheritance from my mother, money your father can't touch. I hope you never need it, but if you do, it's here. Build your life on your own terms. I love you always." "Mom," I showed Marcus, and we both stared at the check in silence. "Your mom is amazing," he said finally. "She really is. But Marcus, I don't want to use this unless we absolutely have to. I want to make it on our own." "Agreed. We'll put it in savings. Emergency fund only." We did use some of it eventually, for the security deposit on our Astoria apartment and to cover bills in the lean months when I was job hunting. But we treated it as a loan to ourselves, setting aside money each month to pay it back. Within a year, we'd replenished the account. It felt important to prove, at least to ourselves, that we could manage without my family's money. "Your father called," she said quietly. "He wanted me to give you a message." "What message?" He said that as of today, you're financially cut off. The trust fund, your position at Harrison Industries, your credit cards, everything. He's removing you from his will. He said if you choose to marry beneath you, you can live beneath him too. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I'd known he was angry, but I hadn't expected this level of vindictiveness. "Alex, I have some money of my own," my mother said quickly. "Not much that he can't access, but some. I can help you." "And Marcus, no," I said firmly. "I don't want his money, and I don't want to put you in the middle of this more than you already are. Marcus and I will be fine. We'll make our own way." I believed it when I said it. I had a degree from Columbia, work experience, and Marcus had his teaching job. We'd be fine. We'd be more than fine. Looking back now, I had no idea how hard it would actually be. Our honeymoon was supposed to be 2 weeks in Bali, a gift from my mother that she'd booked and paid for months ago. We cancelled it and took the refund, using the money instead for a security deposit on a small one-bedroom apartment in Astoria, Queens. It felt like a more practical use of the funds, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a pang of regret when I saw photos of friends vacationing in exotic locations. The apartment hunt had been eye-opening. I'd never had to look for my own place before. I'd gone from my parents' townhouse to a Columbia dorm to a luxury apartment my father owned on the Upper West Side where I'd lived rent-free. Now, Marcus and I were touring apartments with peeling paint, ancient appliances, and landlords who wanted last month, security deposit, and proof of income before they'd even consider our application. We finally found a place on a tree-lined street in Astoria, in a building that had seen better days but had good bones. It was a third-floor walk-up, no elevator, which meant hauling groceries up 3 flights of stairs, with a view of the street where kids played stickball in the summer and neighbors sat on stoops gossiping in multiple languages. The apartment itself was small, maybe 600 square feet total. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person to cook in, with a vintage stove that only had 3 working burners and a refrigerator that hummed loudly enough to hear in the bedroom. The bathroom had ancient pink tiles and a shower with water pressure that fluctuated wildly between scalding and freezing with no warning. The bedroom could barely fit our queen-size bed and a dresser. But it was ours. We painted the walls ourselves, spending a sweaty weekend in July transforming dingy white into a warm cream color that made the space feel bigger and brighter. We bought second-hand furniture from a thrift store in Long Island City, a couch that sagged in the middle but was comfortable enough, a coffee table with a few scratches but solid construction, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs. Marcus's mother gave us dishes and cookware from her own kitchen, insisting she had duplicates. My mother snuck me some nice sheets and towels, bought during one of our clandestine lunch meetings. Between family contributions and thrift store finds, we cobbled together a home. The neighborhood was a revelation. Our building was predominantly Greek and Hispanic families, many of them immigrants who'd come to America seeking better lives for their children. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Papadopoulos, was a widow in her 70s who'd lived in the building for 40 years. She spoke limited English but would leave baklava and spanakopita outside our door, knocking and then scurrying away before we could thank her. Downstairs lived the Rodriguez family, Maria and Carlos and their 3 kids. The oldest, Sophia, was one of Marcus's students, which is how we'd heard about the apartment in the first place. Maria would invite us for dinner sometimes, huge family meals with homemade enchiladas and rice and beans, everyone talking over each other in a mix of Spanish and English. It was so different from my life on the Upper East Side, where I'd barely known my neighbors beyond polite nods in the elevator. Here, everyone knew everyone else's business. When Marcus got home from school, kids would run up to him on the street, excited to see Mr. Chen outside of class. When I came home from job interviews looking dejected, Mrs. Papadopoulos would somehow know and leave comfort food at our door. "This is what community feels like," Marcus told me one evening as we ate dinner at our little kitchen table, the sounds of the neighborhood drifting through our open windows. "It's not about how much money you have or what your address is. It's about people looking out for each other." He was right, but the adjustment was still hard. I'd never had to worry about money before, and suddenly, every purchase was a calculation. Could we afford to order pizza, or should we make pasta at home? Was that shirt I wanted a necessity or an indulgence? Did we really need cable, or could we make do with Netflix? I started tracking our expenses in a notebook, something that would have been unthinkable in my old life. Rent. $1,800. Utilities. Roughly $150. Groceries. We aimed for $300 a month, which meant shopping sales, using coupons, buying generic brands. Student loan payments for Marcus. $400. Metro cards for both of us. $260. Phone bills. $120. Internet. $50. Marcus's teaching salary was $52,000 a year, which came out to about $3,200 a month after taxes and his pension contribution. That meant we had maybe $500 left over each month after basic expenses for everything else: emergencies, clothes, entertainment, savings. It was doable, but barely. And it meant I needed to find a job, fast. I started job hunting immediately, but I quickly discovered that my degree and experience meant less than I thought without my father's name behind them. My resume looked good on paper: Columbia graduate, 3 years of marketing experience at Harrison Industries. But during interviews, it became clear that hiring managers saw through the facade. "Talk me through your biggest accomplishment at Harrison Industries," one interviewer asked during what I thought was a promising interview at a mid-size marketing firm in Midtown. "I led the rebrand of one of our flagship properties," I said confidently. "Increased pre-sales by 25% through targeted digital campaigns and influencer partnerships." "Impressive. And how big was your team?" "I had 2 junior associates reporting to me and worked closely with our external agency." "Who hired the agency?" I hesitated. "My father." "And who approved the budget for the campaign?" My father." The interviewer nodded, making a note. "And presumably your father was quite involved in the strategy discussions?" I wanted to lie, to claim I'd done it all myself. But I couldn't. "He provided strategic direction, yes." The interview went downhill from there. I didn't get a call back. It was the same story at interview after interview. My resume showed I'd only worked at one company, in a role I'd clearly been handed rather than earned. Any successes could be attributed to my father's involvement or the resources he'd provided. I had no track record of achieving things on my own, no proof that I could succeed in a competitive environment where my last name didn't open doors. "We're looking for someone with more diverse experience," one hiring manager told me gently after I'd bombed yet another interview. "Your resume shows you've only worked at one company, in a role you were likely given rather than earned." "I'm sorry, but we need someone who's proven themselves in a more competitive environment." It was brutal and humbling and occasionally humiliating. I'd send out dozens of resumes and get maybe 2 interview requests. I'd prepare extensively for those interviews, researching the company, practicing my answers, dressing professionally in the few nice outfits I still owned from my old life. And then I'd sit across from hiring managers who would politely but firmly tell me I wasn't what they were looking for. I applied for positions I was overqualified for: administrative assistant, junior marketing coordinator, social media manager. I applied for positions I was underqualified for, hoping someone would give me a chance to prove myself. I applied for everything and anything, growing more desperate as our savings dwindled and the pressure to contribute financially mounted. Marcus never pressured me, never complained about being the sole breadwinner. But I felt the weight of it anyway. I'd watch him grade papers late into the night after teaching all day, planning lessons, and worrying about his students, all while carrying the burden of supporting both of us. It wasn't fair to him, and it wasn't the partnership I'd promised we'd have. The rejection started to wear on me. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, spiraling into anxiety about money and jobs and whether I'd made a terrible mistake. I'd stand in our tiny bathroom, looking at my reflection, and wonder if my father had been right. Maybe I wasn't capable of making it on my own. Maybe I'd been fooling myself, thinking I could be more than just Richard Harrison's daughter. "You're spiraling," Marcus would say gently when he found me like that. "Come back to bed. It's going to be okay." "How do you know?" I'd ask, tears streaming down my face. What if I can't find a job? What if I'm just useless? "You're not useless. You're talented and smart and capable. The job market is tough right now, and you're fighting against assumptions about who you are based on where you came from. But someone's going to see past that. Someone's going to give you a chance." 3 months after the wedding, that someone finally appeared. Her name was Diane Rodriguez, and she ran a small nonprofit called New Beginnings that worked with homeless youth in the Bronx. The organization had a tiny budget, a dedicated staff of 5, and a mission I believed in deeply. The position was assistant marketing coordinator, essentially an entry-level role despite my years of experience. The salary was $35,000 a year, less than half what I'd made at Harrison Industries. There was no fancy office, no expense account, no team reporting to me. Just a desk in a cramped office above a bodega on Grand Concourse, a laptop that took 5 minutes to boot up, and work that desperately needed doing. The interview was unlike any I'd had before. Diane didn't ask about my accomplishments at Harrison Industries or my connections or my pedigree. She asked why I wanted to work in nonprofit, what I knew about the homeless youth population, and what skills I could bring to an organization with almost no budget. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this," Diane said, leaning back in her creaky desk chair. "This job is hard. The pay is terrible. The hours are long. You'll be doing everything from grant writing to stuffing envelopes to scrubbing toilets if that's what needs doing. We can't afford to hire specialists, so everyone wears multiple hats. You'll be asked to do things you've never done before, figure out solutions with no resources, and work with populations that will break your heart. Why on earth would someone with your background want this job?" I thought about all the polished, perfect answers I'd given in other interviews. About positioning myself as the ideal candidate, highlighting my strengths, downplaying my weaknesses. But something about Diane's directness made me want to be honest. "Because I need to prove to myself that I can do something real," I said. "Something that matters. I've spent my whole life in a bubble of privilege, having things handed to me because of who my father is. And yeah, I could probably leverage those connections to get a comfortable job somewhere, doing work I don't care about for people I don't respect. But I don't want that life anymore. I want to do work that makes a difference, even if it's hard, even if it doesn't pay well. I want to earn my place somewhere, not have it given to me." Diane studied me for a long moment. "Your father is Richard Harrison, right? Harrison Industries?" "Yes. And he cut you off when you married a teacher instead of whoever he wanted you to marry? How did you know that?" She smiled slightly. "It's a smaller world than you think, especially in New York nonprofit circles. Your husband teaches at PS 145, right? My nephew is in his class." "Carlos Rodriguez?" I blinked. "Carlos is your nephew?" "He is. Smart kid, bit of a troublemaker, but Marcus has been great with him. Carlos comes home talking about Mr. Chen all the time. When I saw your resume with the same last name, I put 2 and 2 together. Did some asking around about you. Heard you'd walked away from your father's money to marry for love. That takes guts." "It's been harder than I expected," I admitted. "I bet. But here's the thing, Alex, can I call you Alex? Please. The work we do here, it's not glamorous. We're fighting for scraps of funding, competing with bigger organizations that have better connections and fancier offices. We're trying to help kids who've been dealt terrible hands, kids aging out of foster care with nowhere to go, kids fleeing abusive homes, kids struggling with addiction and mental health issues. It's heartbreaking work, and a lot of days you're going to feel like you're failing more than you're succeeding. I understand. Do you? Because I've had privileged people come through here before, wanting to help or make a difference. They last maybe 6 months before they realize how hard it is, how little recognition they get, how frustrating it is to work without resources. They get tired of the struggle and move on to something easier. I can't afford to hire someone who's going to burn out and leave. I need someone who's going to stay, who's going to fight, who's going to care even when it's hard. I'll stay, I said firmly. I'll fight. I'll care. I promise you, Diane, I'm not looking for easy. I'm looking for meaningful. And I'm willing to work harder than anyone to prove I belong here. She looked at me for another long moment, then extended her hand. Okay. When can you start? I don't care where you came from or who your father is, she told me on my first day. What I care about is whether you can do the work. You'll be starting from the bottom, doing whatever needs doing, stuffing envelopes, making coffee, data entry, cold calling donors. If you prove yourself, you'll move up. If you don't, you won't last long here. Clear? Crystal clear, I said. I threw myself into the work with an intensity that surprised everyone, including myself. I came in early, stayed late, volunteered for every project no one else wanted. I learned skills I'd never needed before: how to write grant proposals, how to organize fundraising events on a shoestring budget, how to talk to donors about impact instead of just asking for money. Diane noticed. After 2 months, she called me into her office. "You're doing good work, Alex," she said. "Better than I expected, honestly. Most people with your background wouldn't last a week doing the grunt work you've been doing." "I'm not most people with my background," I said. "I'm starting to see that. How would you feel about taking on more responsibility? I need someone to help coordinate our annual gala. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year. I'll still oversee everything, but you'd be handling a lot of the logistics and donor outreach." It was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been hoping for. "I'd love to." The gala was in 3 months, which meant I basically lived at the office for the next 12 weeks. Marcus was understanding, even as I missed dinners and fell asleep on the couch surrounded by spreadsheets and donor lists. "I'm proud of you," he'd say, bringing me tea while I worked late into the night at our tiny kitchen table. "You're doing something that matters." "I'm barely making enough to contribute to our expenses," I said, frustrated. "You're carrying us financially." "We're partners," he reminded me. "Right now, I make more money. In a few years, who knows? Maybe you'll be the one carrying us. It doesn't matter as long as we're in it together." That's what I loved about Marcus. He never made me feel less than, never made me feel like I had to prove my worth through my paycheck. We were a team. The gala was a success. We exceeded our fundraising goal by 30%, and I got glowing feedback from board members and donors. Diane promoted me to marketing manager, with a modest raise that still felt like a victory. "You've earned this," she said. "You came in here as Richard Harrison's privileged daughter, and you've worked your ass off to become Alex Chen, a damn good nonprofit marketer." I respect the hell out of that. 6 months had passed since my wedding. 6 months since my father had cut me off and told me I'd made my choice. 6 months of struggling and learning and growing in ways I never could have if I'd stayed in my gilded cage. I missed my mother terribly. We'd talk on the phone when my father wasn't around, meeting for quick lunches in Midtown where we were less likely to be spotted by anyone who might report back to him. She'd slip me a little cash sometimes, which I initially refused but eventually accepted when our credit card bill got too high. "He asks about you sometimes," she told me over coffee at a small CAF near Grand Central. "Late at night, when he thinks I'm asleep. I've heard him in his study, looking at photos from when you were little." "Then he should call me," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "He's the one who cut me off. He's the one who said I was dead to him. If he misses me, he knows where to find me. You know your father. His pride won't let him admit he was wrong. Then we're at an impasse." My mother squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, you know. The way you've handled all of this, the way you've built a life for yourself. You're stronger than I ever was. You're strong too, Mom. You just show it differently." What I didn't know was that my father's empire was crumbling. Harrison Industries had overextended itself on a massive development project in downtown Brooklyn, a luxury high-rise complex that was supposed to be the crown jewel of his portfolio. The project had hit delay after delay, permit issues, construction problems, environmental concerns. Money was hemorrhaging, investors were getting nervous, and my father was desperate for a solution. He needed a white knight, someone with deep pockets and a reputation for turning troubled projects around. Someone like Chen Industries. I didn't know that Chen Industries existed. Marcus had never mentioned it. Why would he? As far as I knew, He was just a high school teacher from Flushing, the son of grocery store owners. The truth was so much more complicated. Marcus's parents did own a grocery store. But his father, David Chen, was also a silent partner in one of the most successful private equity firms in Asia. David had immigrated to the US in the 1980s with very little money, worked brutal hours at his grocery store while putting himself through night school, and built a small empire through smart investments and an uncanny ability to spot undervalued opportunities. He'd kept his success quiet, not wanting his family to be targets or to change the humble, hard-working values he'd instilled in Marcus and his siblings. The grocery store was real, it was his first business, the one he'd started with, and he'd never sold it because it reminded him where he came from. Marcus had grown up knowing about his father's business success but not flaunting it. He'd chosen teaching because he genuinely loved it, because he wanted to make a difference in ways that money couldn't buy. He'd never told me about Chen Industries because he wanted to be sure I loved him for who he was, not what his family had. And I had. I'd fallen in love with a teacher from Queens, not knowing he was the son of a business mogul who could have bought and sold my father's company 10 times over. The irony was almost funny. My father had cut me off for marrying a poor man, when in reality, I'd married into a family far wealthier than my own. If he'd bothered to look past his prejudice, if he'd actually gotten to know Marcus and his family, he would have discovered that this nobody from Queens was the best business connection I could have possibly made. But he hadn't looked. He'd just assumed and judged and cut me out of his life. I found out the truth on a Tuesday evening in late November. Marcus and I were making dinner in our tiny kitchen, stir-fry with vegetables from his parents' store, when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's my dad. I should take this." He stepped into the bedroom, and I continued cooking, not thinking much of it. But when he came back 20 minutes later, his face was troubled. "We need to talk," he said. My heart sank. Those 4 words were never good. "What's wrong? Is your family okay?" "Everyone's fine. But there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." We sat down on our second-hand couch, dinner forgotten. Marcus took my hands in his. "My father owns Chen Industries," he said. "It's a private equity firm based in Hong Kong with offices in New York, Shanghai, and Singapore. They specialize in real estate development and infrastructure projects. My dad is the founder and CEO." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "Your dad, the grocery store owner, is a CEO?" "He's both. The grocery store was his first business, and he kept it running even after Chen Industries took off. It's a reminder of where he started, and it employs people from the neighborhood who might not find work elsewhere. But yes, he's also running a multi-billion-dollar company." "Multi-billion?" I felt dizzy. "Marcus, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to love me for me, not my family's money. I've seen what wealth does to people, how it changes relationships. When we met, you were dating Preston Ashford, a guy from the right family with the right connections. I didn't want to be another rich guy you dated because it made sense on paper. I wanted us to be real." "We are real," I said, still trying to wrap my head around this revelation. "We've been struggling to pay our bills, cutting coupons, living in this tiny apartment, and your family has billions?" "I'm a teacher by choice, Alex. I make a teacher's salary. My father's money is his, not mine. I didn't want to touch it because I wanted to prove I could make it on my own, just like he did. And I wanted you to see that I didn't need wealth to be worthy of you." "I never needed you to be wealthy," I said, tears forming. "I chose you because of who you are, your kindness, your passion, your integrity. The fact that you're wealthy doesn't change that." "But Marcus, we've been struggling. We could have had help." "I know, and I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. But I was afraid. I was afraid that if you knew, it would change things between us." that you'd feel like you'd just traded one wealthy family for another. I wanted to be angry with him for keeping this secret, but I understood why he'd done it. In his position, I might have done the same thing. So why are you telling me now? Marcus took a deep breath. Because your father reached out to Chin Industries. He needs help with that Brooklyn development project that's been in the news. It's hemorrhaging money, and he's desperate for a white knight investor. He sent a formal proposal to my father's office, asking for a meeting to discuss a potential partnership. The irony hit me like a physical blow. My father, who'd disowned me for marrying a poor teacher, was now begging that teacher's father for a business deal. Does he know? I asked. Does my father know that you're David Chen's son? Not yet. The proposal went through official channels, and our company policy is to evaluate all opportunities on their merits before revealing personal connections. But we have to tell him, Alex. We can't move forward with any kind of deal without disclosing that I'm married to his daughter. What does your father want to do? He wants to meet with us first. Talk about how we want to handle this. The business opportunity is legitimate, Harrison Industries is in trouble, but the Brooklyn project has potential if it's managed correctly. Dad thinks he can turn it around. But he won't move forward without your blessing. My blessing? You're part of our family now. If we do this deal, it will force your father to confront the fact that he cut off his daughter for marrying into a family that's now his only hope of saving his company. That's going to be complicated and potentially painful for everyone involved. Dad won't put you through that unless you're okay with it. I thought about my father, sitting in his office at Harrison Industries, probably stressed and desperate as his empire crumbled around him. I thought about how he'd refused to even attend my wedding, how he'd cut me off without a second thought, how he'd told my mother I was dead to him. Part of me wanted him to fail. Part of me wanted him to lose everything and realize too late what he'd thrown away. But a bigger part of me, the part that still remembered being Daddy's little girl, didn't want him to suffer. I need to think about it, I told Marcus. And I need to meet your father properly. As his daughter-in-law, not just as Marcus's wife from the grocery store family. Of course. How about this weekend? My parents are hosting a small dinner at their home in Alpine, New Jersey. Nothing fancy, just family. They have a home in Alpine? Alpine was one of the wealthiest zip codes in America, where homes regularly sold for tens of millions of dollars. Marcus had the grace to look sheepish. Yeah. And a penthouse in Tribeca. And a place in Hong Kong. But the Alpine house is where they spend most of their time when they're in the States. It's where I grew up, actually. The Flushing apartment is just where Dad keeps the grocery store office. My head was spinning. I'd been married to Marcus for 6 months, had Sunday dinners with his parents at their Flushing apartment, played mahjong with his grandmother, helped out at the grocery store. And all that time, they'd been living a completely different life that I'd known nothing about. This is a lot to process, I said. I know. And I'm sorry for keeping it from you. But Alex, nothing about us changes. I'm still the same person you fell in love with. My family is still the same family you've been getting to know. We just also happen to have a lot of money that we don't talk about or flaunt. He was right. Marcus was still Marcus, still the man who graded papers at our kitchen table, who volunteered at the after-school program, who brought me coffee in bed on Saturday mornings. The money didn't change who he was. But it did change our situation with my father. And that was something we needed to figure out together. That weekend, Marcus and I drove out to Alpine in his beat-up Honda Civic, the one I'd assumed was all he could afford but now realized was probably a choice. The Chin family home was stunning, a modern architectural masterpiece set on 3 acres of perfectly landscaped property with views of the Manhattan skyline across the Hudson River. This is where you grew up? I asked as we pulled through the gates. Yeah. Dad designed it himself. He wanted something that reflected both his Chinese heritage and his American success. Come on, everyone's excited to see you. Linda Chen, Marcus's mother, greeted us at the door with her usual warmth, though now I noticed details I'd missed before: the understated but clearly expensive jewelry, the designer clothes that I'd initially taken for well-made knockoffs, the original artwork on the walls. David Chen was in his study, a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. He stood when we entered, a tall man in his 60s with silver-streaked hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. "Alexandra," he said, shaking my hand. "I'm glad we finally have a chance to talk properly. Please, sit." Marcus's father had always been kind to me, but there was a new formality to this meeting. This wasn't just Sunday dinner chat. This was business. "I understand my son has finally told you about our family's other enterprises," David said with a slight smile. "I apologize for the deception, but I supported Marcus's decision to keep it quiet initially. He wanted to be sure of your feelings for him." "I understand," I said. "And I appreciate that, even if it was a shock." "I'm sure it was. Now, regarding your father's proposal. I've reviewed the Harrison Industries situation thoroughly. The Brooklyn project is troubled but salvageable. Your father made some poor decisions, overextended his financing, and underestimated the complexity of the permits and community relations. But the underlying opportunity is sound. With proper management and adequate capital, it could be quite profitable." "So you're going to help him?" "That depends on several factors," David said. "From a pure business perspective, yes, it makes sense. But this is complicated by family considerations. Your father cut you off for marrying my son. He called Marcus a nobody from Queens, implied he was marrying you for money he thought you'd inherit. Now he's coming to us, hat in hand, asking for that same family to save his company." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "I want you to decide what's best for you," David said gently. "If we do this deal, your father will have to confront his mistakes. He'll have to acknowledge that he was wrong about Marcus, wrong about our family. That won't be easy for a proud man like Richard Harrison. It could lead to reconciliation, or it could make the rift between you even wider. I need to know what you want before we proceed." I thought about it carefully. Did I want my father to grovel? To admit he was wrong? Part of me did. But mostly, I just wanted my dad back. I wanted the man who'd taught me to ride a bike in Central Park, who'd helped me with my math homework, who'd been my hero before his expectations and pride got in the way. "I want you to make the best business decision," I said finally. "Don't let our family drama influence your judgment. If the deal makes sense, do it. If it doesn't, walk away. But if you do move forward, I want to be there when you tell my father the truth. He needs to hear it from me that I'm happy, that I made the right choice, that his cutting me off didn't destroy me, it freed me." David nodded approvingly. "You're stronger than he gave you credit for." I had to be. He didn't leave me much choice. Over the next 2 weeks, David and his team at Chen Industries conducted their due diligence on Harrison Industries. The conclusion was what he'd suspected: the company was in trouble but savable. The Brooklyn project could be turned around with an injection of capital and better management. From a business perspective, it was a good opportunity. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon at the Chen Industries offices in Tribeca. My father thought he was coming to pitch to potential investors. He had no idea he'd be walking into a room with his daughter and the family he'd scorned. I took the day off work, spent extra time getting ready that morning. I wanted to look successful, confident, happy. I chose a sleek navy dress I'd bought with my own money, paired with simple jewelry and heels. Not the designer labels I'd worn in my old life, but professional and polished nonetheless. Marcus met me at the Chen Industries building, a gleaming tower in Tribeca with stunning views of the Hudson. The offices were beautiful, modern, sophisticated, with art from emerging Asian artists and floor-to-ceiling windows. "You okay?" Marcus asked as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. "Nervous," I admitted. I haven't seen him in 6 months. You don't have to do this. We can tell him separately, let my father handle the business discussion. No. I want to be there. I need him to see that I'm okay, that I'm more than okay. David was already in the conference room when we arrived, along with 2 other executives from Chen Industries. Through the glass walls, I could see the conference table, the presentation materials laid out, the coffee service waiting. He'll be here in 5 minutes, David told us. Are you sure about this, Alexandra? I'm sure. When my father walked into that conference room, I watched his face go through a series of emotions: professional friendliness, confusion when he saw me, shock when he recognized Marcus, and finally, dawning horror when David Chen introduced himself. Mr. Harrison, David said smoothly, I believe you know my daughter-in-law, Alexandra. And this is my son, Marcus. Thank you for coming to discuss the Brooklyn project. Please, have a seat. My father stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale. For a moment, I thought he might turn around and leave. But his business instincts kicked in, and he sat down, though his eyes kept darting between Marcus and me. I don't understand, he said finally. Marcus is your son? Indeed. He's married to your daughter, as I'm sure you're aware, though I understand you chose not to attend their wedding. My father's jaw tightened. I was told Marcus was a public school teacher. He is, David confirmed. And an excellent one. He's chosen to pursue teaching despite having other options available to him. I'm very proud of his commitment to education and community service. But you run Chen Industries. I do. I also own a grocery store in Flushing where my wife and I started our American journey. We're a family of many facets, Mr. Harrison. We don't believe in defining ourselves solely by our bank accounts. The dig was subtle but clear. My father had defined himself and everyone else by wealth and status. He judged Marcus without knowing anything about him, and now he was paying the price for that prejudice. Mr. Harrison, David continued, we've reviewed your proposal regarding the Brooklyn development. From a business perspective, it has merit. Your company has overextended itself, but the underlying asset is sound. Chen Industries would be willing to provide the capital and expertise to turn the project around. I saw hope flicker in my father's eyes. However, David said, before we discuss terms, I think you owe your daughter an apology. My father's face flushed. This is a business meeting. This is a family matter that happens to have business implications, David corrected. You cut off your daughter for marrying my son, claiming he wasn't good enough for her. You refused to attend their wedding, told her she was dead to you, removed her from your will. All because you thought Marcus was poor and beneath her. I didn't know, you didn't bother to know, I interrupted, speaking for the first time. You didn't ask questions, didn't try to meet his family, didn't care about who he was as a person. You just saw a public school teacher and decided he wasn't worthy. But you know what, Dad? Marcus is worth 10 of Preston Ashford. He's kind, hardworking, principled. He loves me for who I am, not for your money or your connections. And his family welcomed me with open arms, no conditions, no judgments. Alexandra, I'm not finished. You cut me off thinking I'd fail, thinking I'd come crawling back. But I didn't fail. I got a job on my own merit, I'm doing work that actually matters, and I'm happier than I've ever been. I don't need your money or your approval. I never did. My father looked older than I remembered, the lines on his face deeper. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From being happy? From making my own choices? From making a mistake? From throwing your life away on someone who couldn't provide for you? Marcus provides plenty, I said. Just not in the ways you value. He provides love, support, partnership, respect. That's worth more than all the trust funds in the world. David cleared his throat. Mr. Harrison, I'm willing to move forward with this deal on one condition: you reconcile with your daughter. This isn't about forcing you to change your values or admit you were wrong about money and status. This is about acknowledging that you hurt your child, and that hurt needs to be addressed before we can be partners. My father was quiet for a long moment. I could see him struggling, his pride warring with his need to save his company. Finally, he turned to me. I'm sorry, Alexandra. I was wrong. Not about the money, I still think financial security matters. But I was wrong to cut you off, wrong to judge Marcus without knowing him, wrong to miss your wedding. I was angry and hurt that you chose someone I didn't approve of, and I lashed out. That was unfair to you. It wasn't a perfect apology. It wasn't everything I'd wanted to hear. But it was something. Thank you, I said quietly. That means a lot. Can we start over? My father asked. I'd like to get to know Marcus properly. And I'd like my daughter back in my life. I looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. We can try, I said. But Dad, things have changed. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. I have my own life now, my own career, my own priorities. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, it has to be on equal terms. You can't expect me to just fall back into being your little girl who does what you say. I understand, my father said. Or at least, I'm willing to try to understand. David stood up, extending his hand to my father. Then let's discuss the terms of our partnership. I think we can work something out that benefits everyone involved. The business discussion that followed was technical and complex. Chin Industries would invest substantial capital in the Brooklyn project in exchange for a 40% stake in that specific development and a seat on the Harrison Industries board. David would have final say on all major decisions related to the Brooklyn project, and Chin Industries would provide management expertise to get it back on track. It was a tough deal for my father. He was essentially admitting he couldn't handle the project on his own and ceding significant control. But it was also his only option. Without Chin Industries' investment, Harrison Industries would likely go bankrupt within the year. My father agreed to the terms. Papers would be drawn up by both sides' attorneys, due diligence would continue, but the handshake deal was done. As the meeting wrapped up, my father turned to Marcus. I owe you an apology as well. I judged you unfairly, assumed things about you that weren't true. I'd like to make that right, if you're willing. Marcus shook his hand. I appreciate that, Mr. Harrison. I love your daughter very much. I promise you, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she's happy. I'm starting to see that, my father said. And please, call me Richard. After my father left, I collapsed into one of the conference room chairs, emotionally exhausted. That was intense, I said. You were amazing, Marcus told me, squeezing my shoulder. I'm so proud of you. David smiled. You handled yourself with grace and strength, Alexandra. Your father is a lucky man to have you as a daughter, whether he fully realizes it yet or not. Thank you for making him apologize, I said. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Business is business, but family is family. I won't work with someone who's hurt my family without some acknowledgement of that hurt and effort to make amends. That's not negotiable. Over the next few months, my relationship with my father slowly began to heal. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. There were awkward dinners, difficult conversations, moments where old hurts flared up. But we were both trying. My father made an effort to get to know Marcus, asking about his teaching, his students, his goals for education. They found common ground in their work ethic and their commitment to their communities, even if they expressed it in different ways. My mother was overjoyed to have her family back together, even if the dynamics had changed. We had family dinners at the Alpine House now, my parents getting to know the Chens, two very different families finding unexpected common ground. The Brooklyn project turned around under Chin Industries management. Within a year, it was back on track, pre-sales were strong, and Harrison Industries was stable again. My father learned a lot from working with David and his team about community engagement, sustainable development, long-term thinking versus quick profits. "Your father-in-law is teaching me things I should have learned years ago," he admitted to me over lunch one day. "He's brilliant, and more importantly, he has integrity. He cares about doing things right, not just doing things profitably." "That's where Marcus gets it from," I said. "I see that now. I'm sorry it took almost losing everything for me to open my eyes." As for me, I continued working at the nonprofit, got another promotion, and started teaching a class on nonprofit management at NYU. I loved my work, loved feeling like I was making a real difference. Marcus and I moved to a bigger apartment in Brooklyn, closer to his school. We could have afforded something much nicer with his family's wealth, but we chose a place that fit our lifestyle and values. We wanted to live in the community where Marcus taught, to be part of that neighborhood. My father did add me back to his will, but I asked him to direct my inheritance to a charitable foundation instead. I didn't need his money anymore. I had my own career, my own resources through the Chin family if I ever needed them. The foundation would do more good supporting education and youth programs than sitting in my bank account. Looking back now, getting cut off was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to figure out who I was independent of my father's wealth and expectations. It showed me what I was capable of when I had to stand on my own 2 feet. And it proved that the values I'd chosen, love, partnership, integrity, meaningful work, were the right ones, even when they came with a cost. My father learned too. He learned that worth isn't measured in bank accounts, that judgment based on social class is shallow and often wrong, and that pride can cost you the things that matter most. He almost lost his company and his daughter because he couldn't see past his own prejudices. 6 months after that confrontation in the conference room, we had a small family gathering at my parents' townhouse, my parents, Marcus, and me, his parents and grandmother. Over dinner, my father stood up to make a toast. "A year ago, I made the worst mistake of my life," he said. "I let my pride and my prejudices drive away my daughter. I thought I knew what was best for her, thought I could control her life and her choices. I was wrong about a lot of things, but most of all, I was wrong about what makes someone worthy. I judged Marcus and his family based on surface appearances and assumptions, and in doing so, I nearly destroyed my relationship with my daughter and my company." He turned to Marcus and his parents. "David, Linda, I want to thank you for giving me a second chance. For seeing past my mistakes and arrogance to the desperate father who just wanted to protect his child. And for being better people than I deserved." Then he turned to me. "Alexandra, I'm so proud of the woman you've become. Not because of anything I did, but despite the obstacles I put in your way. You've shown more strength, courage, and integrity than I ever gave you credit for. I'm honored to be your father, and I promise to spend the rest of my life earning that honor." I had tears in my eyes as I stood up and hugged him. It wasn't a perfect ending, we still had work to do, still had rough patches ahead. But it was a beginning. A chance to build something new, something better, something based on mutual respect rather than expectations and control. That night, as Marcus and I drove home to our Brooklyn apartment, I thought about how different my life was from what I'd imagined a year ago. I wasn't living on the Upper East Side in a luxury penthouse. I wasn't working at my father's company or attending charity galas in designer gowns. I was living in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, working at a nonprofit, married to a public school teacher. And I was happier than I'd ever been. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, reaching over to take my hand. "Just how lucky I am," I said. "A year ago, I thought my life was falling apart. But really, it was all falling into place." "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too. And I'd choose you all over again, even if I knew what it would cost me. Even if my dad wasn't secretly a billionaire?" He teased. "Especially then." I fell in love with a teacher from Queens who wanted to change the world one student at a time. The billionaire part was just a surprise bonus. We both laughed, and I felt a contentment I'd never known in my old life. This was what happiness looked like, not designer clothes and trust funds, but love and purpose and the freedom to be yourself. My father had cut me off thinking it would teach me a lesson. It did, just not the one he intended. It taught me that I was stronger than I knew, that I could make it on my own, and that the things that really mattered, love, integrity, meaningful work, couldn't be bought with any amount of money. 6 months later, my father had come begging my poor husband's family for help. And in doing so, he'd learned the same lesson I had. That worth isn't measured in dollars, and the people you underestimate might just be the ones who save you in the end. It was an expensive lesson for both of us, but it was worth every penny.